Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network, the only podcast to take you through the entire back catalogue of A24, reviews the latest releases, and brings you interviews with the people behind these movies and TV shows. I'm Dallas King, and with me as always is my co-host Lee Hutchison. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really, really good. It feels like, I can't believe it, that we're reviewing a movie that, as of about right now, as we talk and so on, has just been released in America and Los Angeles after all the delays we've had in the UK. We are, for once, a little bit ahead of something before we end up being behind as we wait again.
I know, because, let's face it, if it wasn't for the Glasgow Film Festival, we probably would have been waiting until May the 3rd and we'd be once again being, oh, we're going to review a film which everyone's already watched. Sorry. Actually, it was already basically been, everyone's already watched, or in the UK has downloaded off of Apple iTunes, because it's already been released on iTunes in America, because everyone's got those accounts, right? Yeah. No, just that's probably.
It's interesting. I had it the other day. I mentioned it. I'd not obviously seen the Civil War trailer, and then I was in the cinema, and then it was just like the first few seconds played. I was like, oh, this is the Civil War trailer. Like, do I kind of hold off? It's only maybe like a month and a bit till it comes out here in the UK, so we're not far behind America at all for that one. And I was like, you know what? I am just going to step out of the cinema here as it's playing ahead of June and just try and be as surprised as possible. So I just looked like a really odd person just hovering near the door, but not too far away.
Yeah, well, I think there's potential. I haven't seen the second. I haven't seen the full trailer actually. So that one actually could have been the full trailer. So you might have got even more, I guess, potential spoilers if you want to go in as blind as possible. But of course, Civil War will be coming up for us on the A24 project in April after its bout at the South by Southwest Festival this weekend. But first, the review that we've been skirting around is that today's episode is going to be all about A Rose Glass's Love Lies Bleeding. But before we start our workout, of course, we have time for some A24-hour news. Big stories this week include Emily Blunt is going to reteam with her Jungle Cruise co-star Dwayne Johnson in Benny Safdie's Smashing Machine about UFC star Mark Kerr. She's going to be playing his wife in that one. Are you excited for this reteam following Jungle Cruise? I imagine you're a huge Jungle Cruise fan. Are very excited about this, yes?
I'd forgotten that they were in Jungle Cruise together. I have not seen Jungle Cruise, and when you kind of mention that, you can see why perhaps the Rock has made that sort of pivot. Maybe with this film, maybe a bit more long term to maybe doing more auteur-driven films and so on. He certainly had that run of just starring in some really bad movies to the point that he was almost dragged back into the Fast and Furious franchise that he kind of swore off.
Oh, come on. You must know that, he delivered on his promise, and that the entire hierarchy of the DC universe was going to change. Black Adam did actually better business than the likes of Shazam and I think even Aquaman do. But by that point, it was basically decided that the old guard were out, and James Gunn was being given the keys to the kingdom, and went in a completely different direction. So even to the fact that Dwayne Johnson was able to get Henry Cavill back in as Superman for essentially nothing but a cheeky post credit cameo. But I am excited by this. Yes, The Rock has been accused in the past of playing himself, or there's the fun meme of which film is he in. He's wearing a grey shirt or T-shirt. It's very difficult to choose. It could be anything where he's in a jungle or has a giant ape next to him. But I having followed The Rock's career for his entire career since he debuted at Survivor Series 1997 as Rocky Maivia, his acting career he has shown glimpses of, he can deliver a really good performance when he wants to, and the materials right. Be cool. A lot of people are rediscovering the quirky delight that is Southland Tales, and of course, I think he was actually one of the best things in one of Michael Bay's best films, Pain and Gain. So hopefully that is Dwayne Johnson that turns up for Smashing Machine. And I mean, the fact the Safdies have got, I think, good credit. This is just going to be Benny Safdie directing this one, but they managed to get, Robert Pattinson has career essentially changed overnight following Good Time. You know, people's perceptions of him changed. Uncut Gems did a great job of, you know, changing people's perceptions of, oh yeah, no, Adam Sandler can deliver, you know, a non-Adam Sandler performance when he is given the right thing, just like Punch Drunk Love. So yeah, I'm very, very excited and hopeful for this one when that one comes out. Other A24 hour news this week. There was some, how could I say it? Spicy. That's what the kids are saying. Spicy takes. Some controversial comments by one of the CEOs of Neon, the other independent distributor in America, who, when talking about his upcoming slate and his vision for the company going forward, is that he would be focusing on the films and only the films, and if they ever did any merchandise, they certainly wouldn't be selling $60 candles. I wonder who he could have been talking about. Well, clearly he couldn't have been talking about A24, because if he did, he should have known that the candles on the website only cost $48. But as you said prior to the podcast, Lee, maybe he was including the shipping on that one.
Yeah, it was interesting to see them. Like it's rare that you kind of see, I suppose, studio heads and production kind of having a pop like that at each other and so on. I suppose we always think of them as kind of good bedfellows, but like it felt like for a few years when kind of Neon were doing kind of the top business at the top of the Oscar pile, that sort of why were they being successful and someone like A24 wasn't? And then there was that sort of pivot last year, and it just sort of always seems to be between they also rans sometimes in the best respect compared to some of the bigger studios for actually making a dent in them. It's a shame to see that, but I wonder what Annapurna thinks of the whole thing.
Are they still going? Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to truly tell the context of something when it's in print. We don't know if there was, you know, the how the line was delivered. I mean, feel that, you know, the almost perhaps invented internet rivalry between Neon and A24 is surely a good thing. You know, the fact that there are more distributors looking to get these films into cinemas, especially in America, which is such a huge sort of crowded marketplace. I think it's good. I mean, obviously there is going to be competition between the two when it comes to certain titles, when you know, the ones that debut at Cannes, Sundance, and whatever. And you know, of course, there are once again, you know, we'll be going head to head this weekend at the Oscars. A24 obviously have sort of Past Lives and The Zone of Interest as their main front runners, and you know, Neon have Anatomy of a Fall. I did hear just today breaking news that Messi the dog is not going to be at the Oscars. Apparently, there was some jealousy from certain other publicists on the campaigns, apparently, that Messi turning up to the nominees' lunch and everyone making such a fuss over him was unfair on the other films that were trying to gain traction at the time. But I think it's just pure jealousy and the fact that Messi probably did give the best supporting performance of the year, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of trumped what was it? Marvel had was it Cats or something like that? They had like critics got the chance to go to like a random cat cafe in London or something like that. It seems to be kind of more and more things like that are happening when there's a breakout pet.
Yeah, it seems that people have to be slightly more creative than trying to just basically bribe journalists with a load of free booze prior to the screening in order to get favorable reviews. But it was interesting that you brought up a fact just before we started recording, that you'd read that A24 have actually not really spent any money whatsoever above the line in terms of their promotion of their Best Picture nominees this year. And yeah, an interesting strategy from them. How's just word of mouth managed to get them into a really good place, or are they sort of saving their pot for a future year, perhaps?
Maybe you could argue they've spent the pot already getting them to some of those nominations, in particular like Zone of Interest and Past Lives, for example. Like, that's the success. Like, you could spend millions, because I think it said that Oppenheimer had spent sort of 25 million for the Best Picture campaign, which is pretty small fry for someone like Universal, which was that's 25 Moonlights for someone like A24. Whereas you could argue them being nominated how, there was that talk for a while of like Zone of Interest had the most limited, slow release, and I think me and you said, and others, that actually they're just banking on it. If they can get some decent wind at sort of the Oscar nominations, they can go a bit wider with it, and a film that is basically a European film, not in the English language, will probably get a bump off the back of that. Like, it's worked perhaps, so it feels like they've maybe gone a bit strategic this year. They've not seen a window where they can actually compete, perhaps win it as well. I think their best hope is something like Best International Film or something. I think that's the only hope for A24 this year. So why not just spend accordingly?
Yeah, and I guess the best actually. The best. It's. I think that is where it has its best chance. I mean, there's some slight controversy around Zone of Interest being in that category. I know it caused a lot of confusion at the BAFTAs this year when it was basically, nominated and won, best film not in the English language, but then also won best British film, and it's like, well, what exactly? It's like the first time it's probably ever happened where it's like, how does that work? It's like, well, essentially, in order to classify as best British film, basically the money has to come from Britain and some of the talent. Whereas, so you can have a film entirely filmed in a foreign language, but still qualify for British film. Its main rival, of course, is going to be in the Best Picture Oscar is going to be Anatomy of Fall, which is Neon's sort of a big hope here. So there's going to be some everyone's film Twitter's eyes will be on that particular rivalry, but I think all of them will be blown out the water in the end by the juggernaut that is Oppenheimer. I don't think there's anything that can really stop it at this stage, isn't it? Even the dreaded preferential ballot, I think Oppenheimer's still going to take the biggest prize on the night.
Are you going to stay up and watch? I know you're a bit of an Oscar correspondent for these sort of things. Will you be watching it through the night on Sunday into Monday?
It depends. I can't remember. I think it might be on ITV this year. I think it might be on terrestrial television. I think it will all depend on what the punditry is like in whatever studio, because normally the UK punditry is horrendous, and I'd probably just prefer to watch a live feed if I can of the actual ceremony from America, like I do with the Super Bowl, where you get all the great American ads. And wonder if anyone's going to drop any big trailers during the Oscars. It always seems like a really good time to do it. You've got people who like film watching that. I guess we'll have to see, but who knows? We'll find out soon enough. And then but we're already on to the next year's Oscar campaigns. Dune Part 2, which I know that you were not a fan of, but I really liked after second viewing. But yes, no, the Oscars haven't even arrived yet, and people are already talking about next year. So we'll have to start figuring out what's going to be nominated from A24 next year. Will it be this one? I guess we'll find out after discussing it. So Love Lies Bleeding is Rose Glass's second film following 2019's, well, I say 2019's Saint Maud. It debuted at film festivals in 2019, but then didn't actually manage to get a cinematic release until about May 2021 due to COVID. But it is also her second film with A24, and it stars Kristen Stewart, Katie O'Brien, Dave Franco, Jenna Malone, and Ed Harris. Reclusive gym manager Lou falls hard for Jackie, an ambitious bodybuilder headed through town on her way to Vegas in pursuit of her dreams, but their love ignites violence, pulling them deeper into a web and Lou's criminal family. The film is out now in New York and LA this week, before a wider release in the US on Friday the 15th of March, and it will be out in the UK on the May 3rd. It received strong buzz from the Sundance Film Festival, heading over to Germany for the Berlin Festival, before opening the Glasgow Film Festival last week. Now, before we dive into our review, Lee and I were very lucky enough to chat with Rose Glass on the red carpet at the Glasgow Film Festival prior to its sold-out opening gala. So let's hear what she had to say about the film. So your film has sort of done Sundance and then Berlin and now Glasgow. How important are film festivals to a film like yours?
I think very important, because it's this sort of thing which I think is going to rely on a fair bit of word of mouth, I guess. So sort of hopefully get those focused more sort of cinephile kind of audiences going to see it first, and then hopefully they get excited and tell all their friends for when it actually comes out in the cinema.
Feels similar to St. Martin away. We saw it 2019 in London, and it was one of those ones you're like, oh my god, you need to tell people.
Maybe on paper, I think particularly St. Martin, it's a bit of a serious or austere kind of. Anyway, maybe the pitch on paper doesn't isn't super accurate. So I'm not sure if this is the same or not.
This is obviously your kind of second film, but it's your second one with A24.
Yes.
What do you see in them, and what do they see in you?
I mean, they just distributed St. Maud, and they co-financed this one along with Film 4. Both A24 and Film 4 are just very, I guess they're up for taking risks, which is lucky for me, because I don't know, I think it was a bit of a weird sell at first, but they just kind of let us do whatever we wanted pretty much, which was very exciting. I think there's probably not that many production companies that would be doing that.
And I mean, Kristen Stewart, one of our joint favourite actresses, started off sort of well known for Twilight, but then clearly sort of decided to take a sort of right turn into doing films that she wanted to do more things. What was it about her that drew you to her for this role, and as an actress in general, I guess?
I think I just instinctively felt she'd be a really good fit for it. I kind of like the idea of her playing like a kind of moody, hardcore anti-hero kind of person, but with a healthy dollop of neuroses and self-loathing and stuff, which I think she portrays very charismatically and interestingly.
I've been keeping myself spoiler free for this film, and so I've not even watched the trailers yet. But much I know is we're not definitely in like Eastbourne and stuff that we were with St. Maud.
No.
Were you was it a conscious thing to kind of go as far away as possible from the English coast to America?
Kind of. We toyed a little bit between whether to set it in the UK or not. So I think I was a bit daunted by the idea of setting it in America. So briefly before we wrote the draft, I was like thinking about even setting it in Scotland. I kind of still like can imagine the Scottish versions of these characters quite clearly, but I'm still maybe I'm a bit nostalgic for it. But America just seemed to, as soon as all the guns started getting
What would you
involved.
have done differently to make it a Scottish version?
Well, I guess there would have been like fewer gun ranges, a lot sort of like colder, but I feel like a lot of it would have transferred pretty well, to be honest.
And is that something that you as a director have always had, that kind of pull between UK film and Americana and all that sort of stuff? Have you always been influenced?
I mean, I guess, well, probably anyone who makes films anyway. I guess like Hollywood's such a sort of like omnipresent kind of, has such an omnipresent influence on so much popular culture that it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a weird siren calling filmmakers.
I guess one last one for me is, how important is the cinematic experience, being able to, experience it? Because I remember seeing St. Maud, and I nearly sort of wrote you and nearly billed you for a new set of trousers during the jump scare, because it wasn't it's not a jump scary film, but then that one worked so well, it just came out. I mean, how important do you think it is for people to be back in cinemas and experiencing something together? Because I think it almost heightens the experience to be, you all share that same moment at the same time.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a layer of enjoyment that's different. I mean, I'm hoping it's the sort of thing that watching it by yourself in the dark might be kind of exciting as well. But yeah, I love being in a room with other people when everybody's being made to make involuntary gasps and noises and things. I think it adds to the enjoyment. So and that was very much the sort of experience that I was hoping for when I was writing this with my co-writer.
And then my final question, obviously, like, casting for St. Maud was incredible, and it looks like it's going to be the same again for this film. How involved are you in casting and picking out these amazing faces, background characters that obviously inform St. Maud so well? What do you look for in?
Very involved. Like I sort of worked closely with our casting directors, Betty May, and then I think we had a separate casting director just for the background and stuff. But yeah, you want all the faces to feel like they're in the same sort of world. I don't know. There's it was a mixture of like Kristen I was picturing really early on when I was writing it, so we just went straight to her and offer. And then the others, you're kind of like, I guess it was quite. We had to cast a family in this, like Kristen's character, Ed Harris plays her dad, Jenna Malone plays her sister, then Frank plays her brother-in-law. So you're kind of casting a family, which is quite fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and good luck.
How was it getting to speak to Rose Glass? Because I think we both missed out when she came up to Glasgow actually for St. Maud all the way back in 2020, I think it was. So yeah, it was great to get a chance to speak to her, especially as everyone else was really focused on Glaswegian pubs and favourite place to eat in Glasgow. And we were like, we'll ask you questions about the film, don't worry.
Yeah, it was great to interview her. Like, I really enjoyed St. Maud. I think we got both the chance to obviously tell her. We saw it in cinemas, and so one of the lucky few during a pretty crazy time, and that last few minutes was just one of my favourite experiences within the cinema, just in terms of just audience reaction, especially for a packed festival screening as well. So it was an absolute pleasure to talk with her. And I, as much as I tried to stay in a bubble with Love Lies Bleeding, I knew just enough to kind of have that kind of conversation with her, and it was impossible not to think, after her revelation, that this was originally maybe going to be set in Scotland. I would have been very, very curious to see that one, as I think she highlighted. I don't think you could have done a gun range in Scotland, so curious to see how that would have gone.
Yeah, there's an alternate world out there, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. There is a version of this film where it is set in Scotland and probably stars Karen Gillan and another female bodybuilder. Who knows? But so I mean, you said that you didn't know much about it going in. You knew enough to get through the interview, but I know you always try to avoid trailers where possible and stuff like that. So, what were your sort of expectations going in, and what were your first impressions when the credits rolled?
I expected something to be very gay and have really good sound and visuals and so on, and both of those delivered. It was more the Rolling Stone thing that perhaps influenced me of what to expect. I'd obviously seen the pictures of Katie O'Brien and Kristen Stewart as well, so it kind of gave me an indication that it would be sort of a kind of lesbian style story or queer story. So that was kind of what I was expecting, but I didn't expect this sort of family drama to really be at the heart of it. And actually, I don't think I expected it. You know, St. Maud had humour in it, and it was humour that I quite like, that type of things are a bit insane and mad, but actually there's some really good funny moments in it that really either bring up the tension a little bit or just make you realise what a wild trip you're on. I didn't expect it to be as funny as it was, and Glaswegian audiences aren't always my favourite. I think they can over egg things a little bit, but it was one that clearly went down well with an audience on the comedy front as well. And it's one where I was quite surprised by a lot of it in a really positive sense, but I really want to be able to watch that one again. It just I really found it quite surprising in that respect, how comedic it was.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really enjoyed the first screening. Yeah, I know what you say about festival crowds. They're always slightly more enthusiastic, and I think this Glasgow especially, they are probably more on the vocal side, almost tending more towards a sort of an American crowd. They were very vocal, especially like funny moments, and even some moments which maybe weren't meant to be overly funny, but that was the reaction that we got from some people. So I know what you mean about wanting to watch it again, potentially with a sort of more sedate Friday night crowd. But I really, really enjoyed this. I think say I was also a huge fan of Saint Maud, and I was really looking forward to see what she was going to do next. And I have to say that I was actually very surprised. I mean, it's very different in sort of tone and visuals to Saint Maud, but I could still see that this was work from the same director, if you know what I mean. There was links, there was sort of subtle moments, there was sort of moments where sort of there was changes to the body that you weren't really sure if they were happening or not, and there was a bit of that in Saint Maud, but also the sort of through line I think of all of our film so far is that it features women going through an immense period of change. Obviously, St. Maud was going through a huge sort of crisis of faith. Here, Lou goes through an emotional reawakening, while Jackie's transformation is obviously much more sort of physical. And so I kind of like that. What I was really impressed with is there does, in terms of like the queer sort of cinema thing, that it's not as sort of in your face per se, but it's just more also was just presenting a love story as opposed to this is a gay love story. It was like, yeah, this is a love story between two people, but it wasn't like over the top about that. It was like this was just two people who happened to fall in love, and that's what I really enjoyed. This almost the sort of matter of factness about it, and but I mean, this is clearly like a story where it is, you know, I think she talked in the post film Q&A about the fact that, you know, she hadn't actually seen a film like, you know, Thelma and Louise before, and having watched it since she finished filming, she was glad that she hadn't, because she might have been worried about referencing it more. But I did appreciate the sort of the nods to the sort of Americana and these sort of Midwestern thrillers. I mean, to me, it kind of felt a bit like sort of Coen Brothers sort of Blood Simple meets Pumping Iron, the Schwarzenegger documentary. It's, you know, trashy, it's lurid, it's sweaty, it's steamy, but all in the best sort of possible way, if you know what I mean.
It's very 80s in that respect, isn't it? And that's I agree with you. It feels like representation has taken a very good turn, that we went through long periods where it was incredibly rare or hard to find this type of representation in, you know, in our local cinemas or multiplexes, etc. And then there was probably the period of sort of just compensating for that and so on, and people rightly embracing it but kind of being a bit more on the nose with it about these sorts of things, like when it might come to like Oscar campaigning or sort of talking about what these stories are like. And now it's hopefully a sign of our times, and by no means is it perfect for the society that we live in at times for a lot of people, but it's now we accept these as the norm and so on. A lot of us have gay or queer friends, for example, and these stories are kind of that they're there now. It's just kind of as normal as you would expect from a kind of heterosexual relationship. And I think this one does it quite well in the respect that there is the odd nod to it of, hey, it's the 80s. Some people are pretty off base with their language or how they maybe view kind of lesbian characters, but equally among it there were still some good people there as well. I think of the bit where like, and does your dad care? And it's like, yeah, he doesn't care, but there's perhaps the odd gym bro or something like that that's a bit more on the homophobic side with their language as well. So I felt like it threaded it really well, but like it was just a simple love story at the end of the day between two women. And I think that's sometimes what A24 has tended to do incredibly well.
Yeah, and I'm just sort of thinking just now, just thought of a film, and it's like the polar opposite almost of what we watched there in the way that Rose Glass has sort of shot this relationship, and in particular, there's like a montage sequence where it's like they're getting to know each other, and their relationship is becoming physical and stuff like that, and how that was shot, almost like in a way, sort of like a straight sex scene, as opposed to a film like Blue is the Warmest Color, which was shot by a man, and like the sex scenes there between two women, and where it becomes almost graphically titillating to the point where it's not even about these characters more. It's about someone's almost gratification at watching two lesbians having sex, whereas this felt more just like your standard sort of sex scene. And I think a lot of it is down also, to the way that Rose Glass is shot it that way, but also down to the chemistry, I think, between the two actors.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, I wasn't familiar really with Katie O'Brien. I think she mentioned she had been in the Mandalorian or something previously. Which, yeah, I'm a Star Trek guy. I don't really watch Star Wars for the most part. So
if she'd been in a Star Trek, he would have known who she was. Oh God,
yeah, I would have been that little kind of. I'd have been that Leonardo DiCaprio from like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like I definitely have an eye for noticing people that have been in Trek. But yeah, it was one of those ones. I thought she was one of those performances. Like, I go back to thinking about something like Saint Maud, and you were just like, oh, this could be a potential star in the making performance. I think we all know that and take that maybe a bit for granted now with Kristen Stewart. But with Katie O'Brien, it was like, oh wow, like who is she and all that sort of stuff. And you just immediately can just start to see a mixture of, yeah, there's action roles perhaps out there for her as well, but some really great drama roles as well. It was just one of those ones. It's only been 2 films, but you can really argue that Rose Glass has an incredible eye for casting, which it was great that we got a little bit of an insight from her on that kind of process for her.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was quite incredible to hear the story that they'd been casting all across America and just weren't able to find the right person. And then basically, I think it was like almost like one of the producers was expressing their frustration on Twitter, and someone tagged Katie O'Brien on it and going, they're looking for someone who's like a female bodybuilder who can also act. And it's like, this sounds up your street. And she's like, it does sound up my street. Yes, I'm going to send over a video right now. So, I mean, yeah, this was a real sort of breakout role for her. I mean, I'd sort of seen her in The Mandalorian, but it was quite a sort of small part that didn't really allow her to flex, so to speak, her acting chops and stuff like that. But this was really sort of like a star-making turn here. And I think I was speaking to you afterwards and sort of thinking about how the fact that it was, we'd just seen recently in the last couple of years the She-Hulk TV series where Tatiana Maslany was, she was playing the human character, but then there was a CGI version of her as She-Hulk, and it's like there was scenes here where I'm like, why was Kate O'Brien not cast as She-Hulk sort of almost before and after? Because she could probably have done both. And it would, but I guess I think the world and sadly the Marvel Studios cinematic universe has moved on sadly from the 80s, and Lou Ferrigno just put green paint on them and it'll be fine, because she could have done it all practically. I think I thought it was just, there was times when I was just watching and it's like, this is going to be a star. And I mean, there were some people I know in the run up to this film talking about how this was apparently Kristen Stewart's first A24 film, which clearly they have not watched Equals, which is such a shame.
No one but us has watched Equals, Dallas.
Actually, if you ask Kristen Stewart in an interview, would she say this was her first A24 film? Would she remember that she'd done another one?
It'll be like St. Maud not St. Maud, Madam Web, a completely different film, where people were like, oh yeah, I'm loving starring in these kind of Marvel cinematic universe movies, and it's like, actually, you kind of are, but kind of aren't, and so on. And you can imagine people like that sometimes maybe just actually forget the logistics of some of these films that they star in.
Yeah, so I mean, we're obviously, we've done a whole episode on the wonderful world of Kristen Stewart. I mean, do you think that she was a good fit for Rose Glass? Because I think Rose Glass, when she was talking about the film here in Glasgow, she was basically saying that Kristen Stewart was pretty much on the top of her list of who she envisions for this part, just as the character, but also as an actress that she wanted to work with. And do you think that this is the perfect sort of vehicle for her?
Yeah, definitely. I go back to that comedy side of it. Like, I've often always found, even go back to Twilight, particularly that kind of first one, is she does comedy really, really well. Like, I think of that Charlie's Angels film. It wasn't great, but she was hysterical in it. She really, really got the tone of it and was very comedic in it. And I really liked that with this, because like, you watch this perhaps with another performer, it's played quite seriously. It's not actually, doesn't embrace the absurd or the kind of the dry wit that someone like Kristen Stewart has. And I think she absolutely kind of nailed it as well. And just even, I just think she was really well cast and so on. I think people are going to continue to, we know it, and a lot of people know it, how great an actress she is. And I think just people now get an idea of, actually, she is incredibly funny. And for so many times people were so dismissive of her acting talent, when often you were like, she is being actually just quite ironic and dry and quite witty in a unique way. And I think
the
this
Dakota
film,
Johnson effect.
That's exactly it. And she was right down on it.
Yeah, I mean, just you sort of saying that brings to mind, there's a couple of moments where she has to sell something completely just with her facial expressions on the absurdity of how bad things get for this couple, and it just broke me into hysterics for that. Because I mean, things, best laid plans and all that, these two people are in love, they're star-crossed lovers, yet they are pulled into a situation, I'm not going to say beyond their control, because it is technically one of theirs fault, the way that things go, but it's just so happens that everything that they try to do to try and rectify that situation almost kind of makes it worse, because that's what good filmmaking is. You've got to have trials and hurdles for these people to overcome in order to get out the other side. And yet there's always a few wrinkles, including one which is the ex of Kristen Stewart's character, Daisy, who probably had that was a sort of scene-stealing turn, I think, by that actress in this, and how she gets involved and stuff like that. But I mean, in terms of the other sort of cast of characters, you had the sleazy, horrible Dave Franco, and I mean, we have to probably talk about Ed Harris's hair extensions, correct?
Yeah, I loved it, where one of the great stories that Rose Glass shared at the Q&A afterwards was that kind of he had this idea of like this kind of maybe hair, for example, and he, like, I think it was his wife's hairdresser put him in, and Kristen Stewart saw him and was like, he looks exactly like my dad did. And I think there was a great bit where I remember just sort of picking up on it, where you see sort of like an old picture of this family up on the wall and so on. And Ed Harris is there, and actually what they did is they just put Ed Harris's face on this long-haired Mr. Stewart, which definitely adds to the aspect of I want to see this one again in May.
Yeah, no, I thought he did a great job, because it is a very sort of tricky performance. He's in some ways a bad guy, but he does have layers. Being the father of Kristen Stewart's character, he does have some sort of paternal protectiveness over her, even though she is potentially trying to screw him over and stuff like that. So there's this conflict there, which is, you always got to have some conflict in there, which is great. But I mean, some of the best sort of stuff between the two of them is these really sort of vivid flashbacks, as sort of Kristen Stewart begins to open up about her past, and how she might not be all that she seems, and the way that, I mean, actually Rose Glass said this on the Q&A, and we talk about this mythical Q&A that we were able to attend and you weren't, but she talked about how, I mean, one of the most striking visual aspects of it were these flashbacks, which were basically black, and then with the characters just bathed in really dark red light. And the revelation that apparently those were basically done in reshoots and pickups. They were needing something to kind of illustrate the backstory. And I mean, I thought it was one of the sort of strongest elements of it. I really liked the look of that. And I mean, what did you make of the sort of whole look and feel of the film overall, and the soundtrack? Because it's a contemporary film, but it just it really sort of had that sort of gritty 80s feel, didn't it?
Yeah, I really liked Clint Mansell's score for this. I got very excited when I saw that one at
his name
in the credits.
Like,
yeah, but I really loved the look of it, and yeah, it was one of those ones. I think those scenes that kind of bathed in red light, and whether it's subtle or not, that use of it was one of those ones that added to kind of the ambiguity about this character. She is the kind of this great, oh, she's free from the family, doing her own thing, she has a past as well, and so on. And I thought that lent itself really well to it. Just the whole film just looked and felt like a great tribute to the 80s. And even the soundtrack avoided a lot of the pitfalls of period pieces as well. And sometimes I think these more indie films, they have to be a bit more innovative with their soundtrack choices for dating the film, as opposed to kind of some of these bigger ones which tend to go for the hits of the time that people all automatically recognize. And I think Rose Glass mentioned that it was like her partner that created like a soundtrack playlist and so on. And that for me is the dream job, if you're like the plus one of a director, of like, I could do the soundtrack film for you if you wanted and stuff, which certainly made me chuckle.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right in this, by avoiding the sort of big obvious choices for 80s hits and whatever, and by going for more sort of niche, sort of lesser well-known songs, it avoids sort of dating it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it wants to be set in the 80s, but there is, because it is set in this sort of small town, which potentially hasn't maybe really aged. I mean, they talked about it again, but the fact that they found this location where they didn't have to do much to it to make it look like it was set in the 80s. It hadn't really moved on in about 40 years. So there is this sort of timelessness to the story and the film that is done by not dating it horrendously with really big specific songs from the 80s. And I think Clint Mansell's score does that great job of referencing the 80s and the use of sort of synth and stuff like that, but still sort of propelling and moving the drama forward through the score as well, I think.
Yeah, it was all expertly done and so on, and that's 2 for 2 on the soundtrack front as well for her, which it's one of those ones you're certainly getting an impression of what a Rose Glass film can be as well. And just that use of lights, I think of it with Saint Maud as well, just all those kind of beachside lights as well that had it. It's just these films really pop and are so visually interesting in a way that sometimes these types of indie movies can sometimes they fall a little short on. I think she's really set a nice standard for what we expect from her.
Yeah, and sort of another thing that sort of is a follow through from Saint Maud is the very delicate tightrope walk between the sort of the real and the surreal, I guess. There were in Saint Maud some moments of incredible sort of violence and shock, but there was also some elements where you were like, is this happening? Is this not? And it kind of worked in that story because it was to dealing with a woman who is struggling with her faith. So is it all in her head and whatever? And it's fair to say that this film, I'm not going to go into any spoilers per se, but I mean, the ending could potentially be quite divisive between some people. I personally felt that the way it went was in keeping with what had gone so far, in the fact that this character is becoming increasingly reliant on steroids, and so therefore the sort of roid rage, the sort of fever that comes from that drug addiction can, cause your mind to play tricks on you and stuff like that, and you might not know exactly what is real and what is not. And I thought it did a great job of balancing the two. There are some left field moments per se, one that takes place during a bodybuilding competition and one in the final climactic act. But how did you feel they went across? Because I can see some people, certainly if heaven forbid they're ever, once the film's released on digital and are shown out of context, yeah, it could be bad. But yeah, I mean, how did you feel that she managed to balance those two sort of things?
I was surprised, but it made sense. It was one of those ones that was part of like my thinking of like, oh, I'd really like to watch this again, and because you're watching these types of films, like especially with A24, as I say, I try and go in these as knowing as little as possible, and you're letting these sorts of things sometimes just wash over you, but you've got your critical eye on it as well. This has been a filmmaker I've been looking forward to seeing what her new film is going to be for a couple of years, and just thinking, oh, I wasn't necessarily expecting this. And you're just sort of thinking about it. And, those types of comments you just made, those are kind of going through my head of like, yeah, this makes really interesting sense and so on. And it's one of those ones I'm almost looking forward to being able to just watch it and just let it kind of wash over me as just a bit of an audience member. There's often a pressure that comes with these films for the first time. But I really liked it because it was one of those ones I was sitting there thinking, wow, I'm never going to forget this opening night at Glasgow Film Festival. Like, it was just such an interesting choice, and it really builds upon imagery that we see earlier in the film as well. Like, I remember just sort of when it first kind of happens, like when she kind of Kate O'Brien's character gets into a bit of a domestic situation for the first time with Lou's brother, and just thinking, oh wow, they've made her look really big and tall in this sort of size room, and I was like, oh, that's a really interesting perspective and what's planting into my mind, and it just felt like a natural evolution of that. And it's nice sometimes to be shocked and surprised, and to let those types of feelings kind of happen when they do, and think, oh, this is interesting, oh, I didn't expect it to go this way. And sometimes it takes a few seconds when a scene is maybe just a few seconds in itself for the brain to catch up with what's going on screen. But I think it went down particularly well, and as I say, it certainly got quite the, I think, positive support in terms of audience reaction anyway.
Yeah, it definitely went down a storm at our screening. So interesting to see how that plays out wider. I think it worked tonally with the rest of the film. But there was I think it was I was watching an interview with Kristen Stewart about I think it was at the LA premiere. And it basically said that they were trying to make a film that felt like a fever dream you didn't want to wake up from. And I think that was a very, very accurate description of this film, especially how it plays out sort of towards the end as well. So, I mean, no spoilers from us. We're not even going to do a spoiler section because, the film is technically just out. And I think I wouldn't even want to spoil it. I think it's something which really has to be experienced in the cinema as well. Otherwise, you'd accuse us of bigging up this moment and they're not delivering. So we've teased you just enough. But I think hopefully you've got a sense that this is definitely a film that you not only want to see, but should definitely try and catch on the big screen if possible and with an audience, because yeah, this is definitely something that I think goes down very well with the sort of Friday, Saturday night crowd.
Yeah, only a few months to wait until we get it. Hey, outside of New York and LA, people are really going to get it in the coming weeks. But I noticed in London today they had an international women's kind of almost media style screening in the morning at Cameo, not Cameo, at Picture House Central. So that was quite an interesting one already. I didn't expect that.
Hey, I think it's a great choice. It's certainly better than the other um, lesbian crime drama that involves that played at Glasgow Film Festival, which was Drive Away Dolls, which I had the mispleasure to watch as a surprise
Oh, that was
film.
the surprise
Which
film, yeah.
it was a surprise film, and I was shocked at how utterly horrendously bad it was. It was like bottoms bad in terms of being painfully unfunnily. So yeah, if you are given the choice of watching one lesbian crime drama in 2024, make sure that it's Love Lies Bleeding.
And isn't it a good sign that you have a choice of lesbian crime
Well,
dramas
exactly.
to
Yes,
choose
it's great
from?
to have a choice. It's just a shame that one of them was terrible. But hey, that's just my own personal opinion. So we'll leave it up to you. But that's it for the end of this review. However, Lee, you've been quite busy, or your Rolodex has been quite busy, as you've not only recorded but have lined up a few more upcoming interviews for us to listen to over the next few weeks.
Absolutely, yeah. Our next episode is going to be an interview with Ric Flair himself, one of our.
When
I'd
you
say
say himself,
yes, he played Ric Flair, and one of our most really interesting reviews and so on. The guy has a lot to say about sort of the performance, actually reaction from wrestling fans, which I knew nothing about until our conversation and was quite surprised
I'd
about.
heard it, sadly.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this: just like Ric Flair himself, he can create a really good shoot and cut a good promo as well. So look forward to quite a bumper interview on that one. And we've got a couple of Curse interviews that we're going to be recording in the coming weeks. So as you start to make your way through the TV show, I'm desperate to talk about it with the people involved. So we'll have a couple of interviews hopefully by the end of the month to share with you as well. So yeah, we'll keep taking over until Civil War comes out.
Absolutely, it's great that while I catch up on the Curse finally, you've been able to find other people to talk to about it, and they happen to be in the show, which is great. So,
and what's it called? Showing Up is now out on DVD as well. So we'll have something else.
Completely
on the horizon
bypassed UK cinemas, but is finally available. So yes, I have no more excuses. I will need to get a copy of that and watch it soon. But yes, our next big new release review will be Civil War in a few weeks in April once it comes out here in the UK. Yes, going to be interesting to see where that one lands. I imagine that with us both being in the UK, we're going to have slightly different opinions on it than some of the US critics, but we'll have to see. But yes, until then, yeah, get jacked up, go do some pumps, and we'll see you in the next one.